These days, how I get into ketosis is I will, for a day or two, have one meal per day at night, large salad, plenty of cheese, oil, and some type of fatty meat, right? Like beef, steak, something like that. But one meal, less than 1,000 calories for sure. So it's going to be a relatively small salad, one meal a day for 1 or 2 days. And I may then, and very typically, fast. All right. You want to do this with some supervision, medical supervision. Don't do it without getting cleared with your doctor first. Fast for a day. And then during that day, I'm going to drink copious amounts of water with a little bit of salt in it. And I'm going to walk for at least 3 hours that day. And I'll do that while making phone calls, listening to podcasts, doing whatever I need to do or want to do. By that point, end of the day, and certainly the more you get into ketosis, the better your body will become equipped with mitochondrial machinery and so on that allows you to get into ketosis more quickly, assuming you do it for extended periods of time. At that point, probably that night or the morning after, sleeping a lot is also very helpful.
Remove all sugars of all kinds from your diet. There are so many people who know that sugar in the sugar bowl and sugar that they add to their coffee, that's bad for you. We all know that. The sugar in donuts, the sugar in pastries, all that stuff's bad for you. You know that. But a lot of people think that the sugar in organic agave nectar is good for them, but it's not. It's just sugar. A lot of people think that locally sourced, organically produced honey is very good for you. I don't believe it is at all. I think it's nothing but sucrose and fructose, which are sugars. And so all of that stuff needs to be taken out of your diet, whether the food manufacturer added the sugar or the restaurant added the sugar or you added the sugar. It's still sugar. It all needs to go. That's step one. And that's honestly the most important step. Step two is almost as powerful, and that is to remove all grains from your diet. And so the most common grains would be wheat, rice, oats, corn. All those need to go. None of those contain any nutrition that you can't get better from another source. All of them are very inflammatory to your gut. Some people have immediate, obvious inflammation if they eat grains. Other people, the inflammation is much more subtle. It may not show up in the gut. It may show up as inflammation in a joint or inflammation in the skin. But to be on a truly healthy ketogenic diet, you have to remove all grains from your diet. Now, that obviously includes the grains in processed foods that you would get in a cardboard box or a plastic bag, but it also includes organic stone ground grains as well. Eat whole, real foods. The ketogenic way of eating is becoming very popular, and therefore people are starting to make keto products. Keto bars, keto shakes, keto powders, keto ready-made meals. Yeah, okay, that's probably better than eating a Snickers bar. And focus on eating real, whole foods that don't have a label, right? Because if you buy a T-bone, it's just beef. That's it. There's no added, nothing else, right? If you just buy broccoli, then it's broccoli. That's a real whole food.
Eating too much food. This is one of the most common. So they're like, I'm eating all the right foods. I don't understand why it's so hard for me to get into ketosis. I'm only at 0.4 millimolars and I'm doing all the right things. It's because you're eating too much protein, all right? Or you're eating too much in terms of vegetables. But people will sit down and be like, I can eat anything I want. They'll eat a big ribeye and they're like, oh my God, I'm out of ketosis. Yes, it's because you ate too much protein. And then through a process called gluconeogenesis, your liver is going to take that excess protein, in effect, and convert it into glucose, all right? So don't eat too much.
Strict keto should look like a full spectrum, wide variety of foods. Okay, this is unbelievably important for your gut microbiome. As you start a ketogenic diet, you will have a negative shift in your gut microbiome for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Then it rebuilds. And studies have demonstrated after 6 months, a properly crafted ketogenic diet is going to lend itself to a larger amount of different species within your gut. It actually improves gut microbiome diversity later on if you stick with it. Okay, but if you are not getting adequate micronutrients and adequate soluble fiber in and adequate fiber in general, you cannot allow the bacteria within your gut to proliferate.
Try to do ketosis with high protein, low fat. Doesn't work. You can look up something called rabbit starvation if you want to see how well that works. Doesn't work very well. So you need to be consuming, and of course there are exceptions to everything I'm going to say, but to keep it simple, 70 to 80% of your calories from fat. That is a lot of fat, okay? So you need to consume the fat. That is your primary macronutrient.
Stop being afraid of good, healthy fats. This would include butter, ghee, bacon grease, beef tallow, avocado oil, olive oil. These are natural oils that you don't have to go to a factory to get. You can actually make these oils in your own home with the raw supplies. And so obviously those are much more ancestrally appropriate. Our ancestors have made oils from these sources for hundreds and even thousands of years. They're very easy to do. They don't involve any high heat, any chemicals, any hexane, any detergents, any of that kind of stuff. You just make the oil from the oily source, right? So stop being afraid of these fats. These fats are not going to lower your HDL. They're not going to raise your triglycerides. They're not going to raise your A1C. They're only going to move your markers for chronic disease in the right direction. Okay.
You don't have to get all of your fat in your primary meal. This was a tip from a scientist named Dominic D'Agostino, who I've interviewed on the podcast. You can check, if you just search Tim Ferriss, Dominic, then he'll probably pop right up. What he will do, instead of just putting oil and cheese on everything that you eat, which gets really tiring after a while, he will have, say, a soup, like a creamed spinach soup before his meal, and then he can have a meal that appears to be mostly protein and vegetables, because he already got this fat bomb in the form of a cream of spinach soup. It's really about having them close together, but they don't always have to be entirely together.
You might get weak. You might feel kind of lame in the beginning, right? Well, there was a study that was published in the journal Nutrition and Metabolism that demonstrated that it's usually the lack of replenishment of sodium and other electrolytes that lead to people feeling the way that they do early stages of a ketogenic diet. So what that means is that when you first start keto, you can absolutely expect your body to excrete extra electrolytes. Insulin levels drop, which means you're going to lose extra water. That's kind of commonly known by every expert on YouTube, of course. But what ends up happening is when that happens, you're also excreting sodium. And by replenishing electrolytes, you're helping the nerve firing. Okay, some of the issues you feel in terms of fatigue and sort of neurological discomfort comes from the fact that you're not able to send a signal. Okay, your brain uses sodium, right? Sodium sends a signal from an action potential down a nerve. Okay, and what happens is potassium pulls sort of this sodium back and then releases the sodium back into the cell to allow the proper transfer of energy, So when you have a lack of any one of those, particularly in sodium, you're not able to actually have that action potential get to where it's going. It's very important that you replenish electrolytes. And I don't necessarily mean you have to sip on an electrolyte product or anything like that. I think it tastes good and it's beneficial, but just by making sure you get enough salt, enough potassium, magnesium in your diet, and don't be afraid of salt. Okay, it's a beginner tip that I wish I knew 10 years ago.
Stop being afraid of salt. Salt is good for you. All mammals, from the smallest to the largest, love salt and need salt. There is a reason that animals will walk miles to lick on a salty rock. And that's because all mammals need salt. If you prick your finger and you taste the blood, it's very, very salty. That's okay. That's normal. We are salty creatures, okay? Stop being afraid of salt. Now, I want you to not just thoughtlessly use the table salt that comes out of the Umbrella Girl container. Don't thoughtlessly use the salt that they give you at the restaurant because they're going to buy the cheapest variety they can find. Use a good quality rock salt that's been mined from deep under the ground. That's the safest and it has the most minerals. So mind your electrolytes. You have to make sure you're getting plenty of sodium, plenty of chloride, plenty of magnesium, and plenty of potassium. These are very important. They're vital for your good health. They're vital to keep you from having keto flu. They're vital for helping you feel your best. Now, 50,000 years ago, we got all the minerals we need from drinking water out of streams and rivers and lakes. And all those water sources are rich in minerals, but I wouldn't recommend drinking those these days. You can just get a good product that has all four in them, or you can buy several cheap products that have them in them individually.